Paltrocast.
Hey, Yotam,
Hello.
how's it going there?
Good. How are you?
Great, thank you very much. Are you dialing in from Los Angeles?
No, actually from Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. Even
Yeah.
better, I think. How's the day going aside from having to do interviews where they ask you the same questions over and over and over again?
Good, good. I'm actually editing a book, which I'll tell you about later. But
Oh,
yeah.
well,
So,
before we get to that book, you've got a great new live album that's new to us. It's old to you because the show was, 3.5 years ago or something like that. But
yeah.
when you played that show, did you know, hey, this is an amazing show, we should record it? Or do you actually record all of your shows at the soundboard?
No, we don't record all of our shows at the soundboard, and sometimes our sound guy just records and comes to us later, and he said, "Hey, I recorded the show in case you wanted." So we have a bunch of those throughout the years, but with this one, we really kind of like made it a thing that we wanted this one recorded. So we prepared. Let's put it that way. We prepared with the devices and the recording devices and the tracks and yeah.
28 songs, is that the usual set list or there was more for this show?
No, actually, we just finished then we finished a few shows with Descendants. So our shows were much shorter. They were like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So we had to step up with this show, 28 songs. So yeah, normally I think we do, in those shows we did like 15 songs, probably maybe 20. So it was our show and it had to be longer. So
Got it. But when you listen to some of the punk rock greats, for example, the Ramones used to, at the beginning, they played everything almost at the speed of the album. And the last 5 years of the Ramones, they did 27 songs in like 28 minutes. That's how they kind of did it. So it was all sped up. So when you say
yeah.
the Descendants, that's another band that kind of every song's a minute and a half. They don't have a lot of 3-minute bangers.
Yeah, they don't, but Descendants, from my experience of watching them, they kind of keep the tempos similar to what it was on the album. And we tend to go like, I don't know, it depends on our mood. In this album, Live in Tel Aviv, as you could hear, we were all very excited for the first few songs. So we're just kicking ass and just playing everything super fast, which makes it actually more hardcore sounding and less punky, but yeah.
You find in some bands, you have the person who wants to play the songs faster and the person wants to play them slower. Like in the band Kiss, I've read that Gene Simmons wants it slower, Paul Stanley wants it faster. In your case, do you have disagreeing tempos amongst Useless ID?
I have an inner tempo of like what I'm feeling, and it depends on the show. Like if people are jumping up and down, so
Oh,
my instinct is to go faster, and I may signal Corey, the drummer, like I'll do like go up fast, and then Guy could notice it, and he signals Corey down. So we're all kind of like trying to find the middle ground while we're playing. So
so Corey's not playing to a click track. That's what
no, he's not. After actually. After not playing together for a few years with the whole COVID thing,
Yeah.
when we got back, we like that's what I noticed, that in this show we played a few songs very like much faster than they were recorded. So we tried a few rehearsals with a click track, and then I thought it was just like a kind of like a thing, like a heat of the moment type of thing with the show that is the Live in Tel Aviv. Because when we played it with a click, I'm like, all right, this is fine. And then we played it without a click, and I was like, all right, this is fine without a click as well. So what happened? I guess we were all like super excited for those first few songs.
My personal history with Useless ID, I think, was either hearing you on one of the Fat compilations or the Punkorama. Were you on both or just Fat? The Fat Wreck, like short songs for short people. Was that one?
Yeah. We were on Short Songs for Short People. We were on Rock Against Bush. And then, once we started releasing albums with Fat, we were on the rest of I would like to say most of the compilations. So we weren't on any of the Punkorama ones. That's Epitaph, right?
That was Epitaph, but for a while they had other people on there, and there were so many of them coming out, you didn't know who was going to be on them anymore. So it was Fat Records where I first discovered you guys. And from going to Japan a bunch of times and talking to people, it's like, this band is huge in Japan. You know, in the States, it took a while to rise and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I found out your band was playing to thousands of people a night for years before really the States happened. When did you start to notice it happen in the States for you like it did in other countries?
Well, the States was different. The States was kind of like a slow rise because that's where the band started. Like other than Israel, that's where the band was focusing on. Even before I joined the band, they lived in the Bay Area for like 8 months and just toured around the West Coast. And when I joined, we just started touring the States. That was like the plan. We didn't even think of outside of that. We were like, you know, if you make it there, you make it anywhere.
Right.
So, but that well, that proved to be like a very hard road, but we were lucky in the sense that our first album out on Kung Fu Records, Bad Story, Happy Ending, that was distributed all over the world as they would do, Europe, Japan. So the first time we arrived in Japan, we were treated like rock stars, like we were treated like royalty, you know, and it was we were just like, you know, humble and thankful for it, but we it was just odd to us. You know, we're just like all these like four punks from Israel. We just made an album in the States, cool. Album's released, but suddenly they're just driving us all over the place, buying us dinners, super thankful. Shows are super good. We play at a Tower Records, and then 150 people stand in line. You know, no one's causing any trouble, just waiting to greet us. It was awesome, and yeah, and the Japanese fans are great, and even like, and you have to be careful because if there's something in Japan you want and you're wandering around with you know, a Japanese friend, he'll just buy it for you. I was actually on that tour, I was looking for a needle for my record player, and we found one. I think it was $100 or something, and he's like, I buy for you. I'm like, what, are you crazy? So yeah, so that's Japan for you. So to answer your question, we had to tour a bunch, like late 90s into early 2000s. And then we got on some better tours. I think once we did the 2002 Warped Tour, that kind of like got us a bit more in the game, you know, because you're just playing like the biggest shows throughout the whole summer. So we made a lot of contacts through that. And, you know, we kept in touch with No Use for a Name. So we toured a bunch with them throughout the years. And then our whole energy kind of shifted more towards Europe. So we only made it back to the US, I think in 2010, which is weird. Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we put the album out on Fat, so we got like on Fat tours, and we got you know, opening for NoFX later on. So yeah, it's a slow thing with the US.
Right. Well, you mentioned at the top of the conversation, you're working on a book. Is that something you can tell me more about?
If you want to hear about it, I mean, that's not what I'm promoting, but I find in these interviews that somehow it goes there because people are asking me so many questions about the band. So I'm like, well, you know, I'm writing a book because I feel like as time goes by, we've had so many experiences with each other, and even without, like me personally, and being the main songwriter of the band. So I think whoever likes us or whoever likes me as a songwriter, likes our music, I don't think anyone's really going to tell this story, you know, anytime soon. And I also don't want it to be forgotten in time. So I'm going to tell, I found like, I found myself in a position where I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and start writing. And it's been 6 years now.
It's 6 years.
But
I say, you know, to cut you off or interrupt you for a second there.
Yeah.
When I have a favorite band, I want to know everything about them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of my favorite bands kind of have kept secrets. So for example, we don't know anything about Van Halen, except David Lee Roth just decides to talk. And when he talks, it's probably not the truth. And the other members don't say anything. So we go, well, we don't know what we can believe here. Now, if I were a Useless ID diehard fan, why wouldn't I want to know everything about you and the band?
Yeah, exactly. And I you know, there's a fine line between like telling a story and while telling a story, throwing a person under the bus. Because, you know, not everything is smooth sailing, especially when you're playing in a band. But I try to focus on like, you know, the good things for the most part. like, like recording at the blasting room for the first time. That was quite an experience. And I remember that very, like, vividly in my head. I remember it like it was yesterday. And also the second time recording at the blasting room, and then, being signed to Fat Records. And so it kind of like starts out as my personal story with music. And then, and I grew up in the States. So my family moved to Israel when I was just like, discovering just almost at punk rock. I was just getting into alternative music. I was watching all this like VH1 and MTV stuff, like 120 Minutes and all these shows. And I was like, alternative, and like, suddenly there's a punk band. So I noticed it, but I didn't really get into it yet. And then the family decides to move to Israel. So I have to start again. I have to make new friends. So I felt that I really want to tell that story, and, into Useless ID, how I met those guys and my bands, and how I joined them eventually, and now we're the journeys all over the world.
What was that gateway band or bands for you to get into punk rock?
Well, okay, so it was kind of like a slow thing, like because I was really into Nirvana, and I was into like I was looking for bands that sounded like Nirvana, because I wasn't really buying into that whole grunge scene, because I didn't think Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden sounded like that. Like, like the song Territorial Pissings. I'm like, where's that thing coming from? I want to hear more of that. So I found the Exploited, Exploited. Yeah. And I was like, this is kind of similar, with the chords. But I think it was, I was like kind of climbing into it. I found the Pixies, which I love till even to this day, one of my favorite bands. And then I found the Exploited. I found Sex Pistols, not Ramones yet. But I got kicked out of that first school I went to in Israel, and the next school I was sent to was like an art school, sort of like I was in an art class, and there was this skater in my class, which was listening to rap and hardcore. So I asked him like, well, what's this hardcore thing? And then he let me hear Black Flag, Bad Religion, Pennywise, and my brain, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And once he let me hear Gorilla Biscuits, that was the turning point. Gorilla Biscuits was the band that changed my life. Like, I think it was like leading up to that. Of course, Bad Religion, I love them. But I think once I heard Gorilla Biscuits, their message and the way they play it, and me, growing up in Brooklyn, New York, so everything just made sense to me. I'm like, oh my God, they're singing about my life,
That's very unique. Before you were all there, were you originally a metal kid, like, or hair metal from MTV, that kind of thing? Motley Crue, Poison, Bon Jovi, that stuff?
No.
Wow. So that intrigues me, because your sense of melody in some way comes to me as a very power pop and or early pop metal kind of guy.
Okay, so in my earlier years, the first time I really loved Musical Youth, and that was the first show I saw. Remember that band?
Pass the Dutchie.
Yeah. So they played Israel in 1983. I was 4 years old, and my mom took me. So that was my first show, and I loved them. I loved the Jackson 5. I loved a lot of that stuff. But I also really liked the Beatles, and once I heard the Beach Boys, I really liked that. But as you know, I was so young that I don't know, by the time of like second or third grade, I heard the Beastie Boys. Like there was a kid in class that was like, rap is what's happening. And then I just listened, I was like into rap, hip hop, R&B until I discovered Nirvana. So I think, I think a lot of my like lyrical sense, or my lyrical phrasing comes a bit like, not that I'm rapping, but some Useless ID songs have that like many lyric thing going on, and like, how I cut words. So I think that's like the rap influence, but the melodies I could, it's Beatles and Beach Boys and all that stuff.
I wouldn't have imagined that. Well, bring it back to Useless ID. The new album is the live album that, again, is new to me, old to you. Are you on what's coming up for you, Useless ID, in the near future otherwise?
What is that?
Are we getting a new studio album or tour? Or what's coming up for the band?
So when COVID started and I was stuck in Israel, so I was like, I kind of freaked out and panicked in the first few days, because I was separated from my wife at the airport, and I didn't know when I was going to see her again. She was actually my girlfriend then. Now she's my wife, so things worked out. But So I just I started scanning all these old photos and doing a bunch of things that I always helped like put on the side. And I said, one day I'll get to it. But then I started thinking about music. I already had enough songs for my next solo album. They were kind of like, in different phases, but I knew that I had that covered. So I started writing. I wrote for like a couple months, then I stopped. Then, the gates opened and I traveled a bit. And then I was back home, so I wrote again. So I don't know. I've been writing on and off, but the fact that I'm here in the States, one of the guys is in Costa Rica, the other two are in Israel. Everyone's busy with their own things. So it's kind of like we all have to be together at the same place in order for it to happen. I find it that with Useless Idea, it doesn't work as great as for other bands. It works when you share like demos over the phone and send emails of open projects, so the guitar player can record his part. And it doesn't really work because everyone's busy with like other stuff these days. So I don't know. I hope so.
So just wait and see, and keep following you on social media, and that's when we'll know. When
Yeah. I mean, none of us are against making a new album. Like we all love what we do. We love our songs. But by this point, it's like it's going to be our 9th studio album.
Mm-hmm.
And I think individually, we each don't want it to be just another record, because many bands kind of fall into that trap of like, that they find their sound and they stick to it and they know the crowd likes it and it's safe, and just write another 12 songs. So with us, we like to kind of, as you've noticed, with every record, there's a different twist in each one. One is like more of a slower rock record, like Symptoms. One is like Redemption, where we found our sound. And then Lost Broken Bones was like a heavier album, like with more riffs. Mm-hmm. And then State is Burning was a straightforward hardcore punk album. So we kind of like to find these little paths in our own style of music and see what excites us. So that takes a bit of time.
Last question I have for you before I let you go. Every time the wife and I say, hey, we're going to watch this new TV show, we watch it in 3 days and we go, what's next? Do you have a TV recommendation or two from something that we can start watching?
Oh my God. And I have that feeling too. Did you see Eden on Netflix?
No. Who's in Eden?
Oh, so I think that's I don't know where they shot it, but it's in Spanish. But I watched the English version. I watched them talk in Spanish, but they speak English.
Dubbed.
So who's in Eden? I don't know any of the actors, but I was glued to the screen watching it. Eden on Netflix is great. And I've seen something else that Your Shirt, by the way, the 3rd season. I'm waiting for. I saw that it just came out, so I'm stoked for that. Yeah, I'm late to the Wu-Tang party because when Wu-Tang came out, that I was like already deep in rock and punk and all that. So I just listened back like a few years ago, and I'm like, holy shit, I like this.
Yeah, 36 Chambers holds up. The first Old Dirty Bastard album's great. The first Method Man album is great. Where Everyone Went is not always the best, but everyone's first solo record, wow. And
I just finished reading RZA's book, The Tao of Wu. I like the way that guy sees the world. It's very interesting. But I think there was one other show that I was watching, and I forgot what it was, but hopefully I'll remember.
Well, either way.
Oh, Ted Lasso is a great show.
Everyone loves Ted Lasso. I haven't seen it yet, but it's the fact that you're like the 20th person saying I should, I think
you should check it out. Yeah.
But hey, thank you for the many years of great music. Glad the book is happening. Thanks to a new live album. Glad there's a solo thing coming from you in some form in the near future. So whatever it is, we'll keep checking the social media and hopefully get something else soon from you and team.
Hell yeah. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Thanks. Have a great rest of the day in the meantime. Take care.
You too, my man.
Paltrocast.